Greetings, everyone. So we have a perfectly gender-based panel. In the morning, I had a possibility to join a panel on mental health. Now there were only women participating in the panel. So in terms of time, we have a perfectly gender-balanced panel. In terms of space, not exactly. So, but still, I have a wonderful panel. We'll be talking about our businessmen participating in combat operations, why they've made a decision to do so, any impact on the business, whether it has had an big impact on the business, what was the motivation, and how the business skills helped them during the war, and how their military experience is helping them in the business life. Why are we taking this topic for the Economic Forum? We have to understand that the majority of our businessmen and the employees of the businesses, they're currently on the front line, and those people will be returning with disabilities. They'll be returning with the disability that nobody would be able to see. We're talking about mental disorders, and not everyone would be able to retake their positions. So we'll need to change roles. We need to search for new positions for those people. We need to integrate those people. So in the end of the panel, I'd like us to have some advice and better understanding on how we're planning to integrate people, because people will be returning even before the war for different reasons, traumas, wounds. So we as the society, we need to start learning how to live with people with combat experience. So let me introduce the participants of our today's discussion. We have Sasha Terin. He doesn't have an experience of working with his own business, but he's now planning to apply for a grant. He'll be starting his own business, and he'll planning to construct a business in Ukraine, already having some combat experience. We have Sergiy Husovskyi, and I believe you still haven't returned to civilian life completely. Am I correct? No, not yet. Okay, well, I believe that we'll have a good panel, because I was expecting, the answers yes, no, permission to speak, permission to finish speaking. Then Timur Khromaev. Okay, still no. Are you feeling comfortable because you've spent a whole day on forum? And the answer is yes. Well, I'm forcing myself to get accustomed and to return to those daily routine that I had pre-war and then pre-COVID, because we had a lot of forums before the COVID times, and unfortunately, there was the same during the previous panels. So, well, that's sad, because we have the same conversations during the different realities. Well, the reason for asking, I know that you weren't accepting at first the involvement of this the introduction to this forum, but thank you for coming. Of Vsevolod Kozhemiako. So where are you? You're here or there? Look, I'm a volunteer, so I'm a civilian person under the law, but I'm dealing with war on a permanent basis. Thank you for coming. Sergiy Zhuykov. Sergiy, greetings. Good afternoon, good day, everyone. Well, 7 hours ago I was close to Avdiivka, so no, I haven't returned yet. Now, do you feel comfortable staying here with lots of people in the audience? I think I'm calling that we're not military, we're civilians at war, because many didn't have experience before 24th of February, so I don't have an issue of comfort. It's the question of whether it's worth doing that or not. But I'm feeling fairly comfortable because we're among our people. Then Masi Nayyem. Hello. Hello. Oh, you can see me? Yes, I was waiting for those, black humor. If I would be wounded, then there would be, black jokes about the races. But I can see you without one eye. By the way, just recently in the pub, I got a question from my friend, like, how are you feeling? I'm saying, not in a single eye. So, thank you for coming. I want so that every one of us would remember the main purpose, because you have a unique experience. And I want us to have a very good discussion. So a short question: what was your motivation? I know that this question sounds strange to you because that was your decision to go to the front line to defend our country, but you had your own business. So how did you make this decision? What was the motivation? Was that well thought decision, or it was an abrupt decision? So just in one sentence, in one word, what was the motivation? What did you decide to move away from your business for a certain period of time? What did you decide to make this sort of break and to go to war? I'm not going to give you a good answer. I did it for myself. Well, I want to have a harmony inside of myself. If I wouldn't be going to war, to the front line, it would be hard for me to stay here. So I did it for myself. And I understand that I wouldn't be able to, create children. I couldn't do sex if I'm not, on the front line. Who are you? You were just, no one, as Andrei would call it, as someone from Odessa would call people like that. So it's for myself. I don't have a heroic story, like I'm going there to protect, to defend. I'm surely if I would be, sitting in Turkey and watching the news, my friends are dying on the front line, I would kill myself, or I would turn into a drugstore. So just wanted you to know that you did that for yourself, but for us as well. I'll try to answer in one sentence. Well, maybe not in one sentence, but I'll try. So as Masi called that is a decision, a personal one, an internal one. So I was following my own motivation. You may decide not to do that. Well, okay. But my personal story, maybe there'll be more time and I'll tell you that. But at first there was the defense of Kyiv. And then when we started the official registration of our battalion, so at that point you could make a decision whether to go or not to go. But when you have the other people with you who participated in the defense of the Kyiv, well, you wouldn't be able to respond like you go and I will stay because I can do that. Well, I was engaged with the war starting from 2014, and I participated in certain events. So it happened so that many of my friends and relatives, they were at war or had some relations to the war. So I took a decision for myself just a couple of weeks before the start, when it was obvious that the war is inevitable. So the rest of the things were technical. I just returned and started engaging into some processes. Can I tell you that you went to join your kind of friends? Well, I would say that we've gathered together and then we went together. Maybe that would be the right option, the right way to call it. Timur, I know that you didn't came on the first day. Maybe that was a long decision, or you were kind of thinking about that for a certain period of time. So why did you make that decision? That wasn't on the first day, a bit later on. At first, I've sent my family, and then, well, it happened so that I got engaged and then got even more engaged. It started with a couple of posts, and then the war has changed a bit, and there was a need for heavier equipment, and then you just can't stop because you're surrounded with people who are motivated, who support you, and just goes along this way, and it continues until now, but it's becoming more and more organized. So I have to say that I don't have any military experience before that, but I think that the business skills, the management skills, they are very important and they're very useful at war. This is something that our armed forces really need in order to be better, in order to save lives, and in order to conquer the evil. Well, I'm listening to you and I think that you're in the right place because it's very complicated to return people to civilian life. Aren't you afraid that it won't be interesting for you to return to civilian life, that you will like the armed forces better? Well, I'm sort of, surprised with the words return or after the war. Like, I can't imagine not the first nor the second thing at this point, because many people will not return from the war because there's no one else to replace them. And what are we saying, like after the victory or after the war? We understand that the victory will come only when we'll start talking different topics, not about the corruption, not about other challenges that we, discussed the last 20 years or so. So we'll kind of work on this. We'll try to find more. I think he never answered the question, but we'll see. Sergiy, the largest kind of surprise for the rest of your Kyiv counterparts that you're among the military, they joined the military. What was your motivation? Why Sergiy Husovskyi? While the people were surprised, what was your motivation? Thank you. Well, I'm responsible to cooperate with the Foreign Legion, so I'm asking questions about motivation. And the majority of people I work with, they respond.
When I saw what happened in Bucha, in Rostomel, and so forth. Тобто це воїни.
So these are warriors. They came, they understood this injustice, they understood the rate of barbarism. So they couldn't understand what could be the other way possible now. And just the same for me. Like, I don't know how it could be different. Like, I was an officer in the armed forces earlier, so when the war started, you join the war, so it's kind of evident. Well, thank you, Sergiy. So, a matter of call. That's a big question that we tend to ask ourselves. If the Ukrainians have no choice, but we have to defend our country, then what is the motivation of the foreigners fighting here? So that's a big question. We're asking them at Superhuman Center, we're asking, why did you join? And they're saying that they're responding to a call. I couldn't stand this injustice happening in Ukraine. And I would like to express words of gratitude to Olga and Andrei for supporting the idea. Just recently, the first foreigner has received a comprehensive support. He lost the limb below the knee, and someone is saying that um, well, you shouldn't be here because there's severely wounded people in that hospital, but still, without your decisiveness, without your readiness to help those who are fighting for Ukraine, who are fighting for the freedom, I mean, that would be happening. So, big gratitude to you.
Thank you so much. This has been the fourth patient in Superhuman Center from the Foreign Legion, so it's actually really, really cool. And if he had below the knee amputation, Alexander has 2 below the knee amputations, so he has double the trouble. Alex has most recently published his book, and 1/3 of the book is Alexander describing his attempts to get to the front lines. And so you're reading through it and you're like, when will Taran get to fighting? And for like 60 pages of the book, Taran is attempting to get to the front lines and he fails to do so. He's a young man of 25 years attempting to get to the front lines. Sasha, 3 or 4 times you were prevented from going to the front lines. What motivated you? Why did you try so hard? What for? Because I'm stubborn. And that's why the book is called The Story of a Stubborn Man. If it wasn't for those 4 to 5 attempts, there wouldn't be my book. My motivation is probably selfishness and people around me. In terms of selfishness, I wanted the military romance. I wanted to be at the heart of these historic events because we have the opportunity to influence the events, and it will depend on us where the war will go and how it will end. And of course, I wanted to influence these events and be there at the heart of it, but unfortunately, physically, I am no longer able to carry out the missions I would like to carry out. That is why I'm sitting here talking to all of you. Second reason is, of course, the people that surrounded me. I have only spoken, well, almost everyone who I have spoken to, who I've talked to, they're either at war right now, or they have been wounded, or they have been killed, or they're volunteers or medics. And so it wouldn't be possible for me to have any other way. Like Masi said, I wouldn't be able to live with myself being a civilian, just walk on this earth while my friends and relatives are fighting at war. And so these are the main factors why I ended up there, why I fought to be there, and why I try to overcome all these obstacles. Thank you, Alexander. I know that your parents, because they're the grown men sitting here who don't have to ask their parents, but I know that your parents were not really happy about your decision, but we're grateful to you for that decision and grateful for your inspiring a large number of young men to do what you have done. Let us talk about how is it to abandon your business in the first few weeks of the war? Because in the first few weeks of the war, a lot of people were trying to protect their businesses, try to relocate, try to take care of their employees. But you have decided that you will fight the war. And so how did you redistribute the responsibilities and authorities? How did you share this news with your business partners? How did you say, hey, I decided to fight? And they say, what about us? What about the business? How was it for you? What is the right way to temporarily leave your business to fight in a war to make sure that civilians understand you? You know, I am a founder of the Miller Company, and they're lawyers, right? So only a bad lawyer cannot envisage what will happen 5 to 6 steps ahead, right? We had a protocol of what we shall do in terms of full-scale invasion. It was approved 3 weeks before the beginning of the full-scale invasion. When it happened, I had to be in the office, just like my partners. They're present here in the audience. And we were there in the office, and we brought together all of our documents. We called all of our colleagues and we told them to leave Kyiv immediately. My partners left Kyiv and I went to fight the war. How was that? Just like at war, you understand that the most important thing, the strongest thing that you have are people. If people do not know how to fight, they have to be protected. In this system of values, I did not have time for hesitations because we had time for hesitation before we adopted the protocol. Everything was clear to me. We got people out of Kyiv thanks to our partners. The people were making money online, remotely. You know how hard it is because you know how difficult legal business is in essence, but then doing it online is difficult on a whole different level. But that's because people believed in themselves. We were constantly in contact. We would launch joint meetings online. So there wasn't a thought in my head, what do I do with my business? Because the question was no longer about business, it was about people. That's why we got people out of Kyiv. And that's why, since the beginning of the full scale invasion, we have been able to grow because people believed in themselves. And because we know what will happen next. And even for this winter, we have a separate protocol, a separate action plan, and we know what might happen. Because am I a reconnaissance officer or not? Okay, so tell me yes or no. Did you ask your partners whether they want you to fight in a war, or did you just tell them this is your final decision? I did not ask for their advice. And I'm grateful for my partners and for the only person that I love, my brother Mustafa. Not a single one of them had said a word against my decision. This is this ability to love a person, allowing them to make their own decision. And so I thank my partners and my brother because this happens so rarely. Um, Vsevolod, I know that there were no discussions in your business because you have been involved in this for a while, but how did it happen? Did have who's there taking care of things? I want to respond to your previous remark. Grown men don't have to ask for permission from their parents, but they have their parents and their wives and their children they are responsible for, and they're trying to impact their decisions. And so those decisions have been difficult, and they were more difficult than our business decisions because, in terms of the business, it changed naturally. It was not something up for discussion. It was clear to all of my team members, to all of the people working with me, to all of the management, to all of the people in charge leading the company right now. It was not subject for discussion how things will be later. And also, at a certain point, Kharkiv was uh, partially surrounded for longer than Kiev. And so the people that were working for the company and continue work for the company, when they took their families out of Kharkiv, they came back. And you cannot order people to say, hey, you're joining the military with me. But some people decided to join the cause and decided to volunteer to join the military and participate in the defense of Kharkiv. So, was your family against your decision? No, I can't say that they were against my decision, but these types of conversations are very difficult or heavy conversations because emotionally, I cannot even imagine. Uh, I kept thinking, can I stay? I wasn't thinking about whether I would leave Kharkiv and do things I should do, but then I was abroad when the full invasion started, and I couldn't find in my head a single argument supporting the idea of staying abroad, beside the argument of supporting protecting my family. But my family supported my decision to join the defense forces nonetheless because they knew that I couldn't do it any other way. And I'm extremely grateful to all of my family members for understanding me so well. Thank you. Sergiy. Are you supporting your connections to business? How did you make this decision? And what did you tell your team? And are you remaining in contact? Are you involved in the business processes? Or is there just war and then there will be business in the future? In the evening, I think of February 23rd, I was working with clients because we were managing the capital of private clients, and it demanded our presence 24/7 and availability 24/7. When in the morning of February 24th, I made the decision to stay in Kyiv because there was a clear understanding of the fact that if we give up Kyiv, there will be no Ukraine. We warned our team, our operational team. We had people who were working on evacuations. I did not negotiate it with my partners whether I will fight in the war or not. I just informed them of my decision. And for 6 months, even 7 months, I was trying to simultaneously work with clients while being a part of the defense force, but that turned out to be extremely difficult. When after the end of the Kyiv defense phase of the war, and after we have created our own armed forces battalion, not a volunteer battalion, and we were rotated into the east of Ukraine, it was a lot more difficult to work simultaneously. And so the operational team is working on the business, the partners are working strategically, but as of today, I'm not involved in the operational activities of my business at all. And I'm an associated partner right now because unfortunately the war demands my focus. Did business processes suffer from the lack of your involvement? I think they did, of course. Uh, We have to be realistic about things because when a business is systematic in nature, when you can create a workflow, a strategic or operational workflow, it's one thing. But when a business is individualistic and you work with clients from person to person, it requires personal involvement. So, of course, it has suffered. Thank you. Timur, 2 children, wife who is a public personality. Um, were they against your decision? Or was it possible for them to change your decision? Or was the decision made? I don't think there was a point where I had to make a decision. My wife was there, and my wife would be there with me, and she could impact the decision. No, when I stayed in Kiev, I stayed in Ukraine. The decision has been made by me for a while already. And in 6 months, my wife realized that there's nothing she can do about it. You know, when you're there alone, it's a lot easier to make that decision. And my family was in safety in a different place, and so I was talking to them when things were happening, but I was gradually forcing this idea. And when it comes to business, I think it was even easier for me because before that, I had a career of a state official, and so I just left things be. And I was not involved in any of the operational processes of the business. But when everything started, the areas where I actively participated in businesses, of course, we prioritized evacuation of people, and everything came to a halt, a screeching halt for 6 months. But where I am right now is the business projects and processes that I'm involved in. Starlink helps, right? You change your background on Zoom and you launch your Starlink, and you can join meetings from any city in Ukraine, and you can work on a project. And so the armed forces of Ukraine have also been supporting my endeavors. A lot of businessmen remain involved in the processes while fighting the war. We have a couple of IT projects that are being led and managed from the front lines. So the system is very flexible. Timur has mentioned the word Starlink. Sasha mentioned Starlink in his book. How did you use it at the front lines? Why did you need the Starlink systems at the front lines? I think a lot of the people are just scrolling through the social media to use We're using Starlink to scroll through the social media feed. Of course, there would be like a base where we would have a Starlink. A lot of people would come to that base, like flies to the light. And so when you would have a free minute, you would scroll through your social media feed because we didn't really have time to think about finding other employment because it was the initial phase of the war and the intensity was a lot higher, and so almost on a daily basis we would have combat missions, and so we would use Starlink to just text back our family, to send pictures, to look at the pictures of the family, and that was it. Wasn't there uh, when you were at war, wasn't there weren't did you have any thoughts about what I will do after I come back? Should I Google something and come up with a business idea? No, honestly, I did not think about what will happen after I come back home. Because I think, like everyone who is fighting a war, who is in the army, I was never thinking about dying or getting wounded. I was convinced that I'm invincible and I will fight until the end of the war. And uh, this is something that I started thinking when I was hospitalized after my injury. But before that, I thought I would be the war shark and I will continue fighting till the end. A war shark. Okay. Serhiy, how is business operating right now? Do you allocate any time to manage business processes, or whether that was something that was delegated to someone else? Are you looking into things, making comments, or are you where you are 100%? The person that you mentioned, the person who I delegate my responsibility to, is right here, my brother Yevhen. I love him so much, and none of this would be possible without him. He's right there beside the camera. And it was easy for me to make that decision. It was almost automatic. And I don't think we really discussed this decision in general because Yevhen is taking care of the family and business, and I went to fight the war. Yevhen is here, and I'm not. And you have to. I advise you to have a partnership in business, and it's great to have a partner who you love and who you trust completely. Are you at least still giving the side eye onto the businesses or looking or asking at least Yevhen what's happening with the business? Because imagine Yevhen is doing his best and you never ask what's happening. You're just there at war. Can I hear Yevhen crying in the audience? You know, uh, for us not to make jokes about the side eye about Masi, I try to look at the business for sure. Sometimes when I'm in Kyiv, and then I enter my restaurant and I eat, and I understand that everything is well, all is well. We're not talking about revenues or incomes right now. We're just talking about the survival of businesses. I think there will be a separate question pertaining to revenues and income and development, and this is interconnected with the fact of what will happen to people who return from the war, but this is a whole separate issue. Thank you. Just briefly, I would like to ask all of the panelists, business is not preparing a businessman to the military service, and business does not prepare us for the war. But are there any skills that you acquired through business that came in handy at war? For example, in business, I have had this, and that, and then I was able to use that when I was creating teams in the military. Maybe that's a naive statement, but is there anything that you can take from your business life into your military life and say, yes, this came in handy? A lot of things. No, almost everything. there are many things in the military. There are many specialties that require civilian training where military universities cannot train people in or do not provide quality training. For example, if there is an opportunity to involve in the logistics department a mobilized specialist from Nova Poshta, that is great success. And they're cool psychologists, they're great HR specialists, and a lot of the other specialties that support the war effort, because the war is not just something that you see on video or when you see destroyed enemy equipment through a GoPro footage. That's just the final stage of the war effort, the most acute stage of the war effort. But in order to get there, there is so much that has to be done by many people in order to make sure that later you will see these heroes come out and do the things they have to do. Either launch an attack or defend a position. There's a lot larger number of people behind them, supporting them in their effort.
And also the organization, if you know how to organize things, then it's also great because you're managing the processes. Just the processes are different. You need to understand how they're happening, and that's it. And what's also important is the mentality of the business. Business is always focused on the results. So this is something that the military are lacking, because at a certain point it's hard to focus on the results, not on the victory, because surely we are focused on the victory, but on the focus on those small results that you need to give every day by ensuring certain flexibility, and the desire to do something. That's important. I can give you like many examples, and I guess the best projects and the best innovations, and the best parts, they are created by the civilians, those who came from business, and there's a lot of examples like that. So surely the people from business, they are important. Masi, what about the lawyers in the army? So, well, I will pay a lot of money not to become a lawyer, because I'm gonna die. There should be no lawyers in the army. Like, I want to rest. I'm resting in the armed forces. Okay, so that's a pretty decent kind of a holidays. Well, I've lost something, but there were more difficult stuff. Well, so your experience wasn't came in handy in the army. There was different stories, different objectives, different concentration. Well, I used my experience, because in case of law, it's not that you do today something, you sell it tomorrow, and then you have a success. But you'll get success later on. You're constantly under stress, and our employees, they constantly require additional motivation. Now, it's interesting to work with that, because my subordinates, and there's over 40 of them, and I understand where they're losing their motivation. You just see that, you understand how to approach this. But some things that I wrote myself about this, well, one approach is something that is helping me a lot, really. You start every day with an important thought that there's nothing impossible when some creature in the public agency is not allowing you to deploy your personnel in a city close to the front line. You know, understand that you have a possibility, because we're building a law-abiding state, and then people are calling you, and we made it possible still. The other thing that helps us a lot, despite the war, despite the losses, We have significant losses, very significant losses, but still you shouldn't lose your human part, and they reflect you. Well, your behavior. If you're afraid, if you're worried that something's not going to happen, the people will feel that, and it's very hard to send them to the front line. But when they see that, well, you don't care, that sort of motivates. And two other things that I wrote for myself, I, I made kind of a conclusion. If the person is not willing to do something, it will not do that. If you will press in a civilian life, the person will get dismissed and will fire. But if you will press in the army, well, that person will die. It's hard to change those people in the armed forces, but I'm using that. A person who's not willing to do something, and you know that if that person will go, well, that person will surely die, so it's better to replace that. The other person, which is interesting, and surely you've heard about this, and that's being focused. Now, the people are creating, magic. And if I would remind, that we are at war, it becomes easier because you would need to understand what's happening to you, who you are, why do you have this anxiety, and then you make a conclusion, what are you doing? So whenever I'm talking to the other soldiers and they have wonderful stories why something is impossible, but then when you remind them the task and how this can be done, it's becoming easier for them, it's becoming easier for you, and the task is accomplished. Unfortunately, I can't tell you the unit that I serve in, but thanks to these approaches, I would say modestly that we are packed with everything. We have everything. It's all fine. Yes, we heard. Good. So we're perfectly fine with that. Sergiy, question to you. What the war can bring and can offer to the business. So upon the end of the war, well, whenever it ends, is there something that you've learned out of the military domain that could be later used in the business and that is going to work effectively? Or is that a completely different story? I believe this is interrelated by many means. If you want to, to teach or to learn something, you can always learn that. As a businessman, as an entrepreneur, I had not a single experience at war, but how can this person command military units? Just the same businessman or interpreter who's already at war, he can learn something out of these combat operations. For me, primarily, that's some universal stuff. For example, like military leadership, really, because there was two sources for me where you can get some cool stuff. That's professional sport, the psychology of great achievements, and military leadership in the professional army. So anyone returning to a civilian life, well, will start his own business, surely that those things, the understanding that is something that you can get at the risk of your life, how you can communicate, how you solve tasks, how do you organize that, how are you doing all that. This is something you can take out of your civilian life and, have it introduced in cooperation with your own business and your team. Well, in one sentence, how can you use that in the civilian life? That's any leader and any businessman is a leader. That would mean you're able to lead by yourself. So if you're capable of leading people, then you can do that anyway, at any time. So maybe that is the key aspect. I would still offer that any person in business is primarily the person who can work with other people. So using our battalion as an example of what I can see at other units in the armed forces, there's no exceptions. Almost all the businessmen who came to war. These are primarily the people who, demonstrated the best of themselves in the armed forces. And you would need to understand that, because the person who knows how to work with people, who knows how to combine the uncombinable, but what's important that whenever, if all of that is holding at the basement or at the foundation of values, if you are taking the side of the light, then this is something that will work for the victory. But if you're a professional, but there's questions to your morale or to your morality, then there would be other things. Thank you. Thank you. I would like all of us to hear that, because once again, I would like to underline that people will be coming back, people with military experience. And for many years, we've taught the ATO veterans, those people returning in 2014, 2017. We learned them to rewrite their military experience into a civilian one. And when we were asking, what were you doing over the past 5 or 6 years? And they were saying, like, we were at war. So, okay, what did you do? What tasks? How many people were there in the unit? How did you move? And then it appeared that people have wonderful skills. I just wanted you to keep that in your hand, and the story about military leadership, the ability to get focused, the ability to fulfill tasks, those people will be returning with that package of knowledges, with that package of skills. So it would be good to use those people properly. These are not just the people who fought at war, but they have skills of managing people under extreme circumstances. It's just that we need to turn this experience into a civilian one. Timur, if you would be returning to civilian life, what sort of public official would you be after your military experience? Would you become a different public official, or would you never join like the state or the public work? Let me start by answering your question, previous one. When I started, it was really difficult for me to understand how can I kind of use myself. Because over the first 5 or 6 months of the war, that was pretty chaotic. It was more of a guerrilla warfare, I would say. But when the war has turned into something more structural, then I found myself absolutely comfortable, because the development of business processes, managing assets, because you have a limited resource, but you would still need to create something workable, and you would need to engage as much of your personnel as possible. So now, when we have weapons, when the partners are providing a lot of interesting stuff, now we have a big challenge, like how to make it work together. Because whenever we're saying about F-16s or a drone, well, they are not the only weapons of victory. So the weapons of victory are those people who could create this, turn this into a technological machine for destruction, for destroying the enemy. Because we have a limited by high quality human resources, so it can create miracles. And for people coming from the business ready to take responsibility, well, I'd say it's a great things to work with. But I wouldn't like to go into romanticism, because these are difficult stuff and a risky one. But as for the skills and knowledge as well, this is exactly the point. And if we'll do the proper reforms in the army, if we'll do the reform in accordance to NATO standards, then the society will kind of militarize itself, and then we'll be able to develop a very advanced armed forces capable of defending us over a long period of time, considering all the experience that we have now. Now, as for the return, well, that's difficult to imagine now. And unfortunately, oh, by the way, it would be kind of strange for me because if you'll start doing something in civilian life, when someone would say that it's not the right time for the reform, like, dear friends, the best time for doing changes, it's now. That was the time that we had in the past. That's the time we have now. Because people will say that, well, it's not in your due time, let's do it later on. And that's already the second president who's saying that. Maybe during the war, but like green energy, what else? It's not the high time for that. Look, if you know how many kind of liter, how many waste from a single artillery battery. Well, that's a whole amount of waste. We need to start thinking about the country that we will have after the war. So I think it's yes. I mean, and the unwillingness to take no. Let's do that here and now. Let's do that with what we have now. Thank you. Sergiy, would you enroll veterans? Would you suggest enrolling veterans? I know that you're working with the Foreign Legion, but which skills, which knowledge would you kind of consider the most important for the veterans? Why the people would need to enroll veterans with all this, perceptions that people are having? Well, you're using the word people a lot, and I think that the experience of the war, it confirms that people are important for the business and people are important for the war. So if you run some parallels with the business, well, kind of business war, in case of restaurant business, you're working with two categories of people. You're working with subordinates and you're working with the guests. In the situation with the Legion, you need to talk about specifics. They're kind of combining. On the one hand, they're subordinates. On the other hand, they're guests. They're signing contracts. There's a very clear indicator if you're doing the right thing. Just like in the restaurants, there's guests who are returning to you. They're kind of permanent guests. That's the best thing that every restaurant would like to have. Or that could be the same for the lawyers. I mean, however difficult they might be. I've learned a lot about the business and about lawyers. So everyone should go and address to Oleg Makariv because he's a phenomenal guy. Exception from the overall rule for the lawyers. So when you see that the foreigner has served for half a year, and I would say that that's the period when you would need to, well, take this person out of this kind of conditions to switch it to a different aspect. So these people are leaving the country, and this guest, the client, the warrior who's returning here, and we have a lot of them. I think that means that you're doing something in the right manner because they're returning, because there's still the motivation, and that they found confirmation that you were doing the right calls here. So, in summary, I would say that, or in conclusion, I would say that veterans, this is our super achievement after the end of the war. But I would kind of offer a greater understanding about the veterans, who the veterans are. Many people who are staying in Kyiv, who stayed in Ukraine, they are also veterans. They will also have a portion of PTSD. So that has to be a social agreement in between of all Ukrainians, in between of our nation. We have to support one another. We have to understand one another. We have to understand that without you, all of you, we wouldn't have that. Thank you. Thank you. I beg your pardon. I just wanted to say something very important. Just recently, the Ukrainian Veteran Foundation has made a research on the 5th through 7th of September. Just listen to the people. There's people like that among us. There was a question. The veteran is rather what? Like select a person with disability, or hard to say. And 47% said veteran is the person with disability. You know what this about? That even if you have a fine health, then the society still believes that veterans are having some issues. You need to work with that. That is something that you need to correct while we're still at war. That's a big challenge. Look, when I worked in AIDS and HIV, we told that we have to perceive every person as potentially the one who can have AIDS and or HIV. So we potentially have to perceive everyone as something that who might have some mental issues.
The thing is that the people who like it more, the front lines, are here in the peaceful cities. There are a lot of those people. I think all of us here in the panel are like that because, objectively, this is not great. This is not necessarily normal in a general sense of the world, but the war will take a long time. The war will last for a while. And talk about people coming back, maybe we should talk about that, but first and foremost we have to look at how can we help the armed forces of Ukraine, the defense forces of Ukraine, and how do we bring the victory closer instead of talking about what type of skills the veterans should have to be employable. I understand, but people are coming back, and we have a significant number of veterans. We have Alexander right here. He came back and he has to find employment and he has to be integrated into society. We have a center full of people who already came back and they have to find employment. They have to find dignified salary and they are asking, what type of skills do I need? Where do I go? The war will last a while. We'll all have a chance to fight. But a significant number of people before the end of the war will come back, and our mission is to integrate them into this societal life. We might have to do a second round fighting the war. A lot of people haven't done their first round on the front lines. I just wanted to add one more thing. In reality, the question is that the issue is that the country cannot tackle it on its own, and that the country might not be able to ever tackle this issue on its own and prepare the society for the integration of veterans. I will never go into any ministry, but if I were a part of a ministry, what I would do right now and what you can do right now is, like we have done before in our company, is to bring people together, take them to a therapist, to a military therapist, not to the one that we know from, not to the one that we know is Misorha, but to a better one, and to ask what is happening with veterans. What are they going through? Because we will lack one thing as society. We will lack patience to what is happening to veterans, to how they are now. You will have no patience in a week or two after they come back from the war. This is something that you have to work through. You have to develop and grow your patience, and this will help the service members. This will help them greatly, and also you have to treat the service members as equals. This is the key to success, because as soon as you think that they are a little bit out of their mind, or if the person with disability is not independent, that's a mistake. This is your issue, not our issue. Sergiy, you had a remark? You had something to say? I have to say a couple of words. I believe that we'll have to re-envision and reinvent the understanding of what a veteran is and who is the person coming back from the war, because our country has this unique experience today, because on one hand we have the society that is in need of mental health help, and the service members also need rehabilitation. But this movement has to be towards one another, because on one hand, a service member And I'm talking about any type of an individual who has ever been at the front lines or carried out a military combat mission, a person who looked behind the horizon and who saw what death is. This is a person who saw something that most of you will never see. And then, on the other hand, the service member has to understand, and in all of these discussions, I want to avoid idealizing because the situation, because every service member has to understand that their return, the point of their return, depends on themselves first and foremost, on their willingness to return to the normal civilian life. And this is work on yourself, if you understand that. And on behalf of the society, if I can say that it's difficult to teach, but if this is something that is lacking, nothing will work. It's respect. I'm talking about respect right now. There was one remark from Sasha, and then we'll wrap it up because we have 40 seconds left. Sasha, you are a veteran right now. You're 26 years old. You're a veteran. Congratulations. Oh, 27 years old. Oh, you grew up. What are you expecting? What are you looking forward when coming back? What are your expectations from potential employers, business partners, the society? Do you have any expectations? Or do you have any expectations for yourself? In reality, I don't really have any expectations for the society. That's just me personally. My mission right now, what I see and what I do, is to create a cluster between those two categories of the population, civilians and veterans and service members who are coming back or are entering civilian life somehow. We need to educate and raise awareness amongst both of these categories, the civilians and service members and veterans, because when a person is coming back, re-entering the civilian world, not all of them, but some of the people cannot cope. And we have to give them instruments, give them tools of how to understand, how to live in this life, how to communicate. And a lot has changed, for sure, over this period of time, in our mentality, in the way we communicate with each other. And so when people are coming back from the war, they're different. They're completely different. Because we see that when Mohyla left for the war, he was one person. When he came back, he was a different person. He is mentally changed forever. No matter what his family expects or his friends, he will never be the same person. He will never be able to laugh at the same jokes. And we have to understand that. And we should never demand the same mannerisms and behaviors from this person that they had before the war. So I just wanted to see this communication and mutual support and mutual understanding would exist, and that there would be no aggression and no division. Of course, we would not be able to be the same as we were, but we can establish stronger connections and build a society and the future and a healthy society. We talked for an hour. We had former and current restaurateurs, government employees, lawyers. We have spoken to them why they made this decision. They made this decision for themselves. They didn't see any other choice. They didn't discuss it. Was it difficult? We have discussed whether it is okay that some people are working for their businesses remotely now and some people are feeling cut off from their businesses completely. We talked about looking for reliable partners that you can delegate all your responsibilities to. We asked what type of business experience assisted at war, and we found out that many businessmen who are currently on the front lines are skilled soldiers and officers because they have brought into the military their business skills and business experience. There was a really cool word mentioned, the word focus, because this is something that business has brought into the military. And we talked about the fact that during the war, it is always the time to do things now. and we have to do what we have to do now without postponing anything. And we have wrapped this conversation up talking about that all of us will be traumatized in one way or the other. And it's important to integrate people who are coming back and will be coming back. Service members have really cool, interesting skills that can come in handy in the civilian life. So please treat the service members respectfully as people with interesting, useful skills, and remember that people can be veterans at 27 years old. At 27 years old, they can write books like Alexander here. I'm grateful for all of you being present at the panel. Grateful for all of you in the audience. I know that it may sound like an overused phrase, but we are here because of you. And I want to say two words after I have read Alexander's book. Do not idealize and do not simplify the people who fought in the war. Ola, you were a moderator during such a difficult discussion. I'm extremely grateful to you. I've read all of your posts. I don't know how you're coping with all of this, but I would like to express my most sincere gratitude for my brothers in arms who you have helped. But the only disadvantage you have is that you're already married. This is the least we can do, honestly, because of you we are alive. And if I could, I would have done a lot more. I just can't. Glory to Ukraine.